Biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up over the next hour between now and 4 o'clock. It's a big week for the Prime Minister as Sue Gray's report is due to be released in the next day or so. It's likely to harm his premiership further, but is the Prime Minister now politically at least in the clear? With the boss of the energy giant E.ON warning that energy prices could still rise by 40% more, we'll be discussing whether a windfall tax on big energy companies is the right thing to do. And it's been a week of football drama, not only on the pitch, but also from fans in the stands as violence has marred the last week of the football season. Are we in danger of slipping back to the 1980s and hooliganism? And as cases of monkeypox continue to increase across the country, we'll be finding out what precisely it is and whether, frankly, we should be worried about it or not. As always, to get in touch, you can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. We've got that and so much more between now and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news in Rosie.
A very good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister says he doesn't want to introduce new taxes to ease the cost of living crisis. But as pressure grows to introduce a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, Boris Johnson says no option is off the table. Speaking at a school in South East London, he suggested more support will be offered to help households.
I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia.
Labour Party leader, though, Sir Keir Starmer, says the Prime Minister isn't moving fast enough.
I think there's a range of things that need to be looked at, and reinstating universal credit is one of them. There's all sorts of work that needs to be done on benefits as well. But the windfall tax is a simple solution which could be voted through Parliament very easily. It's Labour's plan. We'll vote for it if the government brings it forward. But dithering and delaying is actually the thing that's stopping people getting that money to help them with their bills, because £600 for those that need it most will make a huge, huge difference.
Meanwhile, Downing Street has confirmed the meeting between Boris Johnson and Sue Gray, while she was investigating lockdown rule breaches, was first suggested by Number 10. Officials say they asked for a meeting to discuss the timings and publication progress of her findings. Labour claims the meeting was an attempt to undermine the report. A health worker at Birmingham Children's Hospital has been arrested on suspicion of poisoning an infant with intent of endangering life. The 27-year-old woman's been suspended from her position while the police investigation is underway. Well, we can go live to the hospital in Birmingham now to find out more. Our reporter Will Hollis is there for us. Will, can you just bring us up to date?
Yes, as you said there, police have arrested a 27-year-old woman on the suspicion of administering a poison with intent to endanger life. That's after an infant, a child, died suddenly here at this hospital in the West Midlands. Now, neither the age or the sex of the child have been revealed thus far, and a spokesperson for Birmingham's Women's and Children's NHS Foundation Trust, which runs this hospital, said that the decision to ask West Midlands Police to examine what's happened is part of the Trust's own safeguarding policy and that it's working with the family. They also asked that the family is respected and their privacy is adhered to during this really quite difficult time.
Well, thank you, our reporter there in Birmingham. Now, contact tracing is underway following the first confirmed case of monkeypox in Scotland. At least 20 cases of the virus have been identified in England. The government's advised that people at high risk of catching monkeypox are to isolate for 21 days. The UK Health Security Agency says anyone who's had unprotected direct contact with the confirmed case shouldn't travel and should avoid pregnant women, children and the immunosuppressed. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she was forced to sign a false confession before being allowed to leave Iran. Speaking to Emma Barnett on BBC Women's Hour, the British Iranian national said it happened in front of a UK government witness and it was filmed. Ms Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she expects Tehran to use it against her in the future.
I'm sure they will show that someday.
Of you signing a confession?
Of me signing it, even though it was under duress. And I just want to put it here
on the record
that all the forced confessions that we have been exposed to, they have no value. They are just propaganda for the Iranian regime to show how scary they are and they can do whatever they want to do.
A review into children's services has warned thousands more will end up in care unless there's a radical reset of the system in England. The independent review of children's social care says more than £2.5 billion of investment over the next 4 years is needed to prevent crisis intervention. The Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi says the approval process for foster carers is among the issues. A Ukrainian court has sentenced a 21-year-old Russian soldier to life for killing an unarmed civilian. It's the first war crimes trial since the Russian invasion. The UN Refugee Agency says 6.5 million people have now fled the country. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Darren for this afternoon's briefing.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. Coming up to 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Monday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, it promises to be a big political week at Westminster with the eagerly anticipated full version of Sue Gray's report into COVID breaches at number 10 due to drop probably in the next day or so. And it comes as the government, of course, is under pressure at the same time to help families across the country as energy bills continue to increase quite substantially. Well, earlier, as part of the broadcasting pool interviews, I had a chance to speak to the Prime Minister at a school in South London with the other broadcasters and asked him about that Sue Gray report and also, of course, this rise that we've seen in recent days of the monkeypox case is across not just England and Scotland, first case there today, but also across much of Europe. Let's have a look. Prime Minister, first of all, monkeypox.
Yes.
How concerned should we be?
I'm aware that it's basically a very rare disease, and so far the consequences don't seem to be very serious. But it's important that we keep an eye on it, and that's exactly what the new UK Health Security Agency is doing.
Some countries, though, are looking at quarantine for visitors, looking at the small pox vaccines. Is that something we should be considering too?
I think that as things stand, the judgment is that it's rare. I think we're looking very carefully at the circumstances of transmission. It hasn't yet proved fatal in any case that we know of, certainly not in this country. The UK Health Security Agency, new body, is obviously following very closely.
OK, let's talk about Sue Gray. What did you talk about in your secret meeting last month?
I'm, with great respect, not going to comment on or give any running commentary on her report until we get it. And I think that, to be frank, the moment is not very far off. It can't be long now before I'll be able to say something, but I really want to wait, as I've said for a long time now, until Sue report.
Did you initiate that meeting, though?
I'm not giving any running commentary on the process in any way until the independent report is produced.
But
I think that is reasonable. I've been asked to comment on all sorts of things over the last few months. we're here, for instance, to talk about the incredible national tutoring programme that we launched to help pupils catch up from COVID, and it's going gangbusters. And here in this school at St Mary Cray in Orpington, they're giving kids tutoring one-on-one or 1 to 3, 1 to 2. It makes a huge difference. When I was at primary school in London, I benefited massively from a teacher that took a direct personal interest in me. I know what a difference it can make. And I think that the tutoring programme is something that will give tutoring, which some parents have it anyway, they buy it in, but this will give kids who don't normally have access to that kind of direct personal interest, care. And for me, it's levelling up. It's giving kids opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have. So what we want to do is to get from, if you can think about it, at 11, at year 6, 65% of our kids, of our pupils, currently have good enough reading, writing and mathematics. We want to get that up to 90%. Now imagine the change for our country if you go from 65% to 90%. It would be absolutely transformational for chances of people growing up in this country.
Just one more question on Sue Gray. You say the report's independent. Many people say she reports to you fundamentally, and you've met with her. Can you really claim, not asking for the report, but is the report still independent?
Of course, but on the process, you're just going to have to hold your horses a little bit longer. I don't believe it will be too much longer, and then I'll be able to say a bit more.
One final topic, that's the cost of living crisis.
Yes.
Are you ideologically opposed to a windfall tax? Is it unconservative, a windfall tax?
Plenty of... I don't like new taxes. And I think it's very important that we focus on investment and jobs. Now, the reason we're in a strong position to help people is because we've got unemployment at the lowest level since 1974, when I was in a primary school like this. That's massively important, and it enables us to use our fiscal firepower, our taxpayers' money, to help people. And we're going to continue to do that.
So it's not unconservative?
No option is off the table. Let's be absolutely clear about that. I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia. And we're going to put our arms around people just as we did during the pandemic.
And just very finally on that, you said at the Queen's speech day that you're going to make an announcement within days. It's now nearly 2 weeks later. When are we going to hear something about what the government's doing with cost of living?
We are already, don't forget what we've already done. £22 billion we've already put in to help people. The 9.1 billion to help with energy costs, £150 off your council tax, increased warm homes allowance, and of course the cut in national insurance contributions, which on average will be worth £330 for somebody on average earnings. So £330 cut in NI. That comes in July. So there's a continuing stream of effort
but more to come.
To shield people. And of course, this thing is going to go on. Everybody can see the increase in energy prices. There is more that we're going to do. But, again, you just have to wait a little bit longer.
You just have to wait a bit longer for both potential announcements on the cost of living crisis and indeed on Sue Gray's reports. That was the Prime Minister earlier. Let's speak to the Labour MP Graham Stringer, who is live for us in Westminster this afternoon. Graham, good afternoon to you. The Prime Minister insistent, isn't he, that Sue Gray's report is independent and that we're likely to see it pretty soon?
Well, he insists it's independent. I don't think it's a good look to have had a chat to the independent, inverted commas, person writing the report, but I suspect she's got enough integrity not to have been influenced by it. I just think we've had an episode during the whole of COVID where people in number 10, politicians, officials, behaved as though the law had nothing to do with them. And it was like an episode of 24-hour party people.
Indeed, it may well be, but frankly, that seems to be almost wholly confined to the civil servants rather than the Prime Minister himself. He's only been fined once. There's no further police action. And at the same time, your leader's also under investigation by Durham police. Politically, the Prime Minister's out of the woods is what I'm trying to say, isn't he?
Well, he's been fined. I suspect that he's not being fined more because it's his office and his home at the same time, which rather complicates the law in that case. But the fact was, he knew there were parties going on. He attended some of them. That's just a complete disregard for the law that he proposed. Look, I thought the law was absurd. I voted against it. The whole process of spending police time on this is absurd when there are young men being knifed to death in London. For the police to be spending time on this is absurd. But he passed the law, but he's had an attitude that the law is for other people, not for him. I don't think he's out of the wood at all. I've no idea what will be in this civil servants report. But the whole thing is a disgrace, and the man has no shame and no respect for the truth.
OK, well, let us know what you think at home about that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's move on to the cost of living crisis now, Graham, if we can now. I mean, it looks probable, doesn't it, that there is going to be this windfall tax, something clearly Labour have been fighting for the last couple of months. But it's not terribly clear that it's going to make that much of a difference in terms of the money that people at home may well get to try and offset the cost of living crisis. Suggestions it could be as little as 150 quid, which, of course, you know, as Tesco says, every little helps. But it's, you know, we're talking about people who are struggling with bills going up hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of pounds.
I think the government should get on with it. They should decide how it's going to help. That would be a start. I don't think it's the only thing that they can do. We're talking about energy prices. That's going to be a big issue. We've also got an increase in food prices coming along. One of the things, very indirect, but it will help, that the government could do is put resources and money into getting grain and other food out of Ukraine. Because if that food rots or doesn't come out, then it will be a crisis. Well, it will force the price of food beyond people's reach, certainly in poor countries, and many poor people in this country will fail. So I think the government, from one side, the supply side, putting money into help individuals and taking the cost off people. If we're going to have all the green taxes, and it's estimated that 25% of fuel bills are going on so-called environmental and social taxes. If the government's going to carry on with those, maybe they should put them against another heading within the government's budgets, not for individuals to pay, because it's a flat rate tax in effect, which the poorest people will be hit hardest by. So there's a whole range of things the government could do if they were serious about improving the lot of people who are going to be hit by what's going to be a bad bout of inflation.
OK, well, interesting stuff. We're going to have to wait and see what the government are going to do on that. We're told it's going to be relatively soon, but we shall wait and see. Graham, as always, thank you very much for your time. Graham Stringer there, joining us from Westminster Labour MP. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be a bit more talking about the windfall tax, what Keir Starmer's been saying today, plus violence in football, what's going on there, and monkeypox. Should we be concerned? What is it? How's it spreading? Is it dangerous? That and much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to the briefing.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m, as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News, where the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, has been also speaking in the last couple of hours. We heard from the Prime Minister earlier on. Let's hear from Keir Starmer about the cost of living crisis, that windfall tax, and of course Sue Gray's report. Let's have a look.
Sir Keir, you're here talking about the cost of living. This morning, a government minister said that ministers were considering a windfall tax. That's presumably something you want to see.
Well, here in Sainsbury's, both staff and customers have been talking about the cost of living and the prices that they can't afford. Part of the answer is staring the Prime Minister in the face, and that's Labour's plan for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies and using that money directly to reduce bills by up to £600 for those who need it most. But what's the government doing? It's dithering, it's delaying. Last week they voted against a windfall tax. Now they're saying they're looking at a windfall tax. They need to get a grip of this situation, because every day they dither and delay, more people are struggling, really struggling with their bills.
The windfall tax on energy companies is not, as you can see, the panacea. It's not a single solution to the problems people are facing.
It's not a single solution, but Labour's plan would be to use those excess profits that weren't expected this year for oil and gas companies, to bring down bills by up to £600 for those that need it most. Now, everybody I've spoken to has said, look, that looks like a good plan. That £600 for those most in need would make a huge difference just at the moment. So instead of dithering and delaying, the government just needs to get on with it and help working families who are really, really struggling with their bills at the moment.
What about reinstating the uplift to universal credit? That's something, again, that a government minister today said that they weren't considering. Would Labour back that?
I think there's a range of things that need to be looked at, and reinstating universal credit is one of them. There's all sorts of work that needs to be done on benefits as well. But the windfall tax is a simple solution which could be voted through Parliament very easily. It's Labour's plan. We'll vote for it if the government brings it forward. But dithering and delaying is actually the thing that's stopping people getting that money to help them with their bills, because £600 for those that need it most would make a huge, huge difference.
The Conservatives have said that your party has so far made more than £90 billion of unfunded spending commitments. How can voters trust you to really get a grip of the cost of living and protect the economy?
Well, they're wrong about that. I don't know where they've got that figure from. But what we've done is put practical solutions on the table. And the Conservatives have attacked us for the windfall tax on oil and gas companies in the North Sea to help people with up to £600 off their bill. The Tories have attacked that. They voted against that. I think they're about to bring a version of it in and do a screeching U-turn on it. But the dither and delay is what's costing working people.
Can I ask you about the Sue Gray report,
Yeah.
which we're going to get any day now? Do you have confidence that Sue Gray hasn't been lent on by Number 10? We now know that the Prime Minister did secretly meet with her a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I always had a concern that as we got to the publication of the Sue Gray report, there would be attempts by the government to undermine her and undermine the report. And that's what we've seen going on over the weekend in recent days. A new low for the government. What we do know is there was industrial scale law breaking in Downing Street, over 120 fines. So what we need now is the full report, all of the evidence. It's the least that the public are entitled to from this government.
So Keir Starmer there speaking a little earlier. Let's speak now to Tom Howard, our political correspondent, who is in Downing Street this afternoon. A rather damp Downing Street, but glad to see they've rolled out the red carpet for you there, Tom. Very good afternoon. Let's talk, first of all, about Sue Gray. It's on everyone's lips in and around Parliament, isn't it? We are expecting it finally to be published probably in the next 24 hours or so.
That is the expectation. It doesn't seem likely that it will be published today. I'm not sure many people were expecting publication today, but we do have a rough idea now of how the sequence of events will play out when the report is sent to the Prime Minister. Because, of course, it's not Sue Gray who publishes this report herself. The report is one being drawn up by Sue Gray in the Cabinet Office for Number 10. So what will likely happen, going off the back of what happened last time round when the interim report was published a few months ago, in the morning Sue Gray will send the report to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's office will prepare it for publication and it will be published around the middle of the day if things go as they did last time round. And then the Prime Minister by the afternoon will come to the Commons to make a statement and address all of the contents of the report and all of the stories we've been hearing so much about for the last 6 months. Now, that could well happen tomorrow, it could well happen on Wednesday, but it will certainly be happening this week. That's the widespread expectation in Westminster. Of course, this report has been a long time coming. It has been being prepared since the start of the year. It was going to be published, or meant to be published, a lot earlier than now, of course, but it was delayed by the start of that police investigation which began at the end of January. The police investigation has now concluded. Over 100 fines for these addresses behind me. Of course, not just Number 10, but the whole street of Downing Street and, of course, Whitehall as well. Most of those fines, of course, going to civil servants rather than elected politicians, but certainly 2 fines going to politicians, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, of course. There'll be a lot more to explain because within the report we're also expecting not only some detail and some pretty excoriating analysis, but also potentially photographs, and that might be the biggest punching bag for the opposition to use against this government.
And Tom, what do we make about this so-called secret meeting that took place between Sue Gray and the Prime Minister and other officials in Downing Street? The opposition parties are calling for the minutes to be published, for the details to be published. What's your reading of it? Is it being blown out of proportion, or is it something, frankly, we should know about?
Well, Number 10 has come out today to clarify a lot of the details that seem to be... we were hearing different stories and different lines from different people over the course of the weekend. It's taken nigh on 3 days to arrive at what has apparently happened, and various different weasel words have been used at various moments over what is... many people are saying a relatively innocuous meeting. A meeting happened, of course, before the publication of the interim report. A similar thing happened at the start of this month. The confusion is over who called that meeting. Initially, Number 10 was seeming to suggest that it was Sue Gray herself that initiated that meeting, but now we have clarification. It was Sue Gray's office who sent the physical invite to the meeting, who initiated the meeting in that way, but it was actually the Prime Minister's office, according to the Prime Minister's official spokesman this morning, actually the Prime Minister's office, which suggested that a meeting may well be useful. Now, Sue Gray is operationally independent. Her investigation doesn't have any direct control from Number 10. Sue Gray is a respected senior civil servant. She could have said, no, I don't want to meet you. That's the line from Number 10, of course. And Number 10 say that it's entirely proper for the Prime Minister's team, or indeed the Prime Minister, to meet with Sue Gray to discuss how this report will be published, the logistics of that. That's the suggestion from Number 10. However, Number 10 also say that they won't be publishing the minutes of the meeting. They say it would be irregular to do so, a private meeting between the Prime Minister and a senior civil servant. However, of course, the opposition saying that that raises some eyebrows and asking why on earth did it take 2.5 days for us to arrive at what happened with regards to this meeting?
Indeed. It's going to be a big week, though, and we will be bringing you all the twists and turns, you and I, I'm sure, and everyone else, over the next 24, 48 hours. Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just to bring you up to date with some breaking news that's just happened in the last minute or so. You may remember, of course, the Conservative MP, Imran Ahmed Khan, who had been found guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy back in 2008. Well, he has been jailed in the last couple of minutes at Southwark Crown Court for 18 months. So that is Imran Ahmed Khan, the former Conservative MP for Wakefield, has been jailed for 18 months at Southwark Crown Court. We'll bring you more on that in the next couple of minutes in the news bulletin. But first, let's touch on a story in which a display of Union Jack flags on Regent Street for the Platinum Jubilee has rather absurdly been likened to Nazi Germany by some. Our reporter, Darren Walker, has been speaking to the public to find out what they think.
Well, the Union flags are being hung up all over the country in preparation for Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations in just a couple of weeks' time. And you only have to walk into a shop and you'll see bunting for sale, paper plates, all displaying our national Union flag. But people on Twitter today have been comparing the flags, the hanging of the flags, to Nazi Germany. You look back at that old kind of newsreel footage of when Adolf Hitler was in power between 1933 and 1945, and you see all those swastikas hanging on German buildings in Berlin, in Munich and other major German cities. And perhaps people who voted Remain, on Twitter at least today, have been kind of see people who voted Brexit as racist, as nationalist, and they see the Union flag as a symbol of Brexit. But from speaking to people here on the street, they fail to draw the comparison between Nazi Germany and the Union flag.
What the Jubilee stands for is a really lovely occasion, and I think it's important to recognise the Queen's reign and how long she's been doing this for and what she's done for the country.
There's always people that will criticise, especially online.
It looks nice. What else do you want to put there?
Some people online, they're comparing it to Nazi Germany in Berlin, hanging swastikas.
Rubbish. Load of rubbish.
That might be a little extreme.
No, I think that's appalling.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think it's the Jubilee coming up. It's nice.
That's just patriotism.
It's been the British flag for years and years. I mean, just about as long as the Queen.
It's something to celebrate, so why not celebrate it? There's a lot of things wrong in the world.
Well, Her Majesty the Queen will be celebrating her Platinum Jubilee in just a couple of weeks' time. 70 years of service she will be marking, and no doubt people up and down Great Britain will be celebrating on that bank holiday weekend, extended bank holiday weekend, with many Union flags.
I think on the camera, Walker reporting from Regent Street. You're watching GB News. Going to be talking about football violence and monkeypox in just a couple of minutes. But first, just after 3:30, here's the latest news headlines and Rosie again.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date now on GB News. Breaking news in the last couple of minutes. A former Conservative MP has been sentenced to 18 months in prison for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Imran Ahmed Khan was expelled from the Conservative Party and resigned from the Commons after he was convicted last month. The 48-year-old carried out the attack in January of 2008. Now, Downing Street has confirmed the meeting between the Prime Minister and Sue Gray during her investigation was first suggested by Number 10. Officials say Boris Johnson discussed the timings and publication process of her findings into lockdown breaches. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the meeting was an attempt to undermine the report.
I always had a concern that as we got to the publication of the Sue Gray report, there would be attempts by the government to undermine her and undermine the report. And that's what we've seen going on over the weekend in recent days. A new low for the government. What we do know is there was industrial-scale law-breaking in Downing Street, over 120 fines. So what we need now is the full report, all of the evidence. It's the least that the public are entitled to from this government.
A health worker's been arrested on suspicion of poisoning a child who died at Birmingham Children's Hospital on Thursday. The 27-year-old has since been released pending further inquiries and has been suspended by the hospital. The Prime Minister says he's not in favour of new taxes to ease the cost of living crisis. But as pressure grows...
I'm not attracted.
...companies, Boris Johnson says no option is off the table. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Darren with the briefing.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.257 to the dollar. The pound is 1.179 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,476 and 4 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity. That's the question. That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News, 22 minutes to the top of the hour. We're on TV, online and, of course, on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for coming on this Monday afternoon. Now, as you can see, some breaking news, and you may have heard it in the news bulletin there. The former Conservative MP Imran Ahmed Khan has been sentenced to 18 months in prison after being found guilty of sexually assaulting a teenage boy back in 2008. He was expelled from the party within hours of his conviction and later resigned from Parliament. There will be a by-election in Wakefield next month. We've been exploring the background of the case. Let's have a look.
I'm here because I'm standing for Parliament.
For a while, Imran Ahmed Khan appeared to be the potential darling of the Conservative Party. He was a committed Brexiteer, the grandson of a miner, a father born in India. He seemed to represent a new conservatism. one at ease with modern Britain. He was Wakefield born and bred, and in 2019 finally managed to defeat that constituency's long-standing Remainer MP Mary Cray.
Great to be back. Great to start the campaign.
The seat had been Labour-controlled since 1932.
I will do it again, but I'll do anything for the constituents of Wakefield.
Morning, sir. Morning, sir.
But last year, Khan was charged with a historic sexual offence, accused of groping a 15-year-old boy in 2008. The victim said he'd felt scared and vulnerable as Khan forced him to drink, watch pornography, and then attacked him. The jury decided he was guilty. Following his conviction, it took around 3 weeks for Khan to finally submit his letter of resignation. It's thought that he collected his MP salary in full for the month of April. But for many here in Westminster, the real scandal is the culture within the buildings behind me, the seemingly endless stream of sexual assault allegations, and ultimately the character of those whom we elect. Amazingly, despite his crime, Khan was supported by a fellow Tory MP, triggering a fresh row. Former committee chairman Crispin Blunt later said he'd step down at the next election.
I do think that in every walk of life you will come across people whose behaviour is not what you would expect, it's not appropriate, and it doesn't just live in Westminster, in other businesses as well. But it's what we do about it, and unfortunately we've seen a slew of complaints being made against sitting members of Parliament and no real plan as to how we're going to protect the people that are working there.
Mr. Khan has no comment.
Since Khan's conviction, a string of new claims have emerged about the conduct of other MPs.
Any word for your victim, Mr. Khan?
Yet more exasperated questions about how to fix Westminster's rotten culture. Tom Harwood, GB News.
So that breaking news, as you can see there in the last couple of minutes, Imran Ahmed Khan, the former MP for Wakefield, sentenced to 18 months in prison. OK, let's move on to football, because thousands of Manchester United's, or Manchester City fans, I should say, poured onto the Etihad pitch as the club won its fourth title in 5 seasons over the weekend, beating Aston Villa 3-2 yesterday. However, Greater Manchester Police had to get involved after an assault on their keeper. And in similar fashion, on Thursday, Crystal Palace boss Patrick Vieira was involved in an altercation with an Everton supporter, and Swindon Town players were physically and verbally abused after their League Two semi-final playoff defeat against Port Vale. So what the devil is going on? Join me in the studio is sports commentator and broadcaster Aidan McGee. Aidan, what is going on? Why are we seeing this kind of almost upsurge of violence on the pitch, but caused by fans?
Well, look, I should caveat everything before I say this. I sat here several times over the weekend and predicted boldly there'd be no trouble yesterday. That's come back to bite me. Having said that, you look at it, that was an extremely tense situation at Manchester City yesterday. And the club knew that there's going to be an encroachment onto the pitch by supporters if they won their 4th Premier League title in 5 years. Manchester City had it controlled. They had a square around the dugouts. That was a safe zone. Yes, the Aston Villa goalkeeper, Robin Olsen, I wouldn't say he was attacked, but he was certainly confronted and his life made difficult in much the same vein. In fact, even in the same area, similar area of the pitch as Patrick Vieira was on Thursday. But in terms of whether I think it's endemic of a wider problem, I honestly don't. I think it's in a small window. It's a very tense part of the season where relegation is decided, promotion, championships, the cups, the medals are all handed out. It's the crescendo of your season. It's everything encapsulated. In fact, it can be one season in one game. Leeds United went yesterday with everything on the line.
To the boil.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is not football violence as we know it from the 80s and 90s and going back even to the late 60s. That was organised crime, ostensibly. That was groups of fans attaching themselves to clubs like Millwall, West Ham and Chelsea if you're in London, clubs like Stoke City, Birmingham, Leeds, Portsmouth. Yep. They were people from commercial backgrounds, believe it or not. The police fought wars against football violence, and it was an embarrassing thing. It was called the English disease all around the world, but they couldn't get to grips with it because for years they assumed it was an oik or a bunch of oiks from the local estate near the ground. It wasn't that. They were foot soldiers, yes, but the perpetrators were people who had 9-to-5 jobs, often in the city, earning good money with a wife and child, holding down good jobs, car, nuclear family, etc. And at the weekend, they just turned into a monster. Some people joined the Territorial Army to do that, get it out of the system, Darren. they wouldn't become weekend warriors. These guys were doing something different at weekends.
So what's the reaction of the authorities been? Is there a sense that, as you say, this is not something they're concerned about, it's not really that big a deal, or are they concerned?
No, I don't think they are that concerned, to be honest with you. I mean, they have to pay lip service from time to time, but Patrick Vieira and the police, for example, have just, they said they're not investigating his kick out at a supporter, which I think would be a bit obscene if they did that anyway, given that he wasn't the aggressor. Yes, one of my colleagues phoned the FA last Friday while talking about the Vieira incident and said, we're aware of the incident. I mean, you don't say. That's a classic FA response. Yeah. But I think they feel it will die a death, and it will. It will just subside. The season's over now. There's no national tournament this summer. There is a World Cup later in the year, but it's in Qatar. There's going to be a very limited number of England fans who are going to get to go. By August, when the threat of, the big stick in the cupboard here, Darren, is points deductions, fines. With CCTV now and camera phones, it's very, very difficult to partake in football violence on a regular basis. That's how it died out in the first place, really. I mean, even some people, there are some social scientists who said in the late 80s that it was the ecstasy scene around London instead of fighting each other, they started loving and kissing each other. Well, so
maybe a much better approach to life. Let's talk briefly, as well, about sponsorship, because talk is the government potentially going to clamp down.
Oh, they're doing it.
They're going to do it on sponsorship from gambling companies.
Yeah, so it's a white paper on gambling reform within sport. They've obviously realised that, or they've decided that the betting industry, the gambling industry, not just domestically but overseas, has its tentacles too deeply embedded into our national sport. Now, it's OK for the top six, because they have such high revenue streams, they don't rely on gambling cash anyway. They might have a betting partner, but they don't have none of the top six have sponsors on their shirts, so they're in coots with the government. It's lower down. It's lower down in the Premier League. West Ham United have signed in 2019 a 6-year deal with Betway for £60 million. If you take that away from them, especially given the money with the money they've lost in the pandemic, that leaves a huge hole in your balance sheet. Yes, the top six probably like that because it makes the teams below them weaker, and it prevents any Leicester City-style outliers coming at them if you weaken their financial power. But below that in the EFL, I mean, they're not going to impose it quite as quickly. They're going to phase it out in the EFL, whereas the Premier League have actually pushed for this white paper to be published sooner so that a ban can apply for next season, whereas if they delay a bit longer and it comes out in, say, October, then it's going to have to be carried over into next season. They want it out quickly. I think it's bad for the brand. There's a bit of a precedent. We touched on it off camera just a moment ago. Snooker suffered badly in the 80s from the loss of tobacco advertising revenue. I remember a time when Dennis Taylor won the World Snooker Championship. There was 18 million people watching, and it was fueled by tobacco money. The table looked like a box of cigarettes. That's what one of these execs said. So that never really recovered. The prize money's never been as good because of that. Having said that, the F1 they were able to recover pretty well. They lost advertising revenue
going to be a big blow
through tobacco as well. So yeah, it needs thinking about. There's maybe the government are delaying slightly because they need to consider these implications. But it's interesting that the top six in the Premier League are going full steam ahead. That's all about greed, Darren.
Indeed. Well, that's money and football go hand in hand these days.
Of course it do.
Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Aidan McGee there joining us in the studio. Let's move on to Scotland and let's talk about ScotsRail's new timetable, because it's going to see almost 700 fewer train services a day. Begins today, and it comes as the deadlock over driver pay continues. Not just talk about strikes, of course, in Scotland, but across the country as well. But let's stick with Scotland, because ministers insist that they're scaling back the number of services under the new temporary timetable, and they'll reduce the need for cancellations. But hospitality and entertainment businesses across the country are warning that the situation will affect their income, while some commuters are concerned they could struggle to get home from work. Joining me now is the Scottish Conservative MSP, Graham Simpson, who is down the line for us in Scotland. Graham, very good afternoon to you. And it's fair to say, I think probably there are fewer people using the train as regularly as they did pre-pandemic. Is this not a sensible thing? I'm sure ScotsRail have done this, having looked at what services are working and what are not.
Well, the reason this has been done is because drivers are saying they don't want to work on their rest days, their days off. ScotsRail are running a service which is completely reliant on drivers working on their days off, in other words, overtime. So at the moment, they're saying, well, we don't fancy that. It is linked to a pay dispute. They're not quite at the stage of taking industrial action yet. But what is bizarre is that ScotRail is now nationalised. It's been nationalised since April Fool's Day, actually. And the Transport Minister doesn't seem to realise that. She doesn't seem to realise that she's actually in charge. Her attitude seems to be, well, it's all up to ScotRail. She's washing her hands of it, and she doesn't want to get involved. It's completely bizarre. And meanwhile, as you said, we've got 700 trains cancelled starting today. The nighttime economy is really going to be affected. Things like the Edinburgh Festival will be affected, even some sporting fixtures. I mean, Scotland are playing Ukraine next week. That's an evening game. Fans who would have maybe got there by train and gone home by train won't be able to do that because the trains aren't there.
But isn't the point, Graham, though, that in the end, what you're possibly proposing is that taxpayers just subsidise trains that people don't use very much?
No, this comes down to timetabling and a lack of staff. This isn't as a result of not many people using the trains. And actually, if it was, then the way to get people back on trains is to provide the trains and cut the fares. The way not to do it is to reduce the service and to introduce a service which we have from today, which means that people can't get trains home late at night. Sometimes they can't get to work on time because the trains aren't there. That's not the way to run a train service. What we need to do is have the SNP government sit down with the unions and try and resolve this. And that's not happening. There just aren't any talks going on.
Well, we'll have to see how that plays out, as you say, and maybe the SNP government might look at it again and talk to ScotRail. And there's talk about strikes not just taking place in Scotland, but indeed across Britain in the coming weeks. Graham, thank you very much indeed. Graham Simpson there joining us from Scotland. Let's end the programme on monkeypox, because it's a nasty virus, been around for a long time, but it seems to be spreading quite quickly across lots of the UK, lots of Europe. Scotland today confirming its first case. What is it? Is it harmful? How do we contain it? Should we be concerned? Let's speak to the epidemiologist, Dr. Roland Salmon. That's a picture of some of the symptoms of it there, who is joining us now. Very good afternoon to you, Roland. First of all, where has this come from, and why is it suddenly seemingly spreading much quicker than it did in the past?
Well, it's come from the rainforests of tropical and West Africa, and it was contained there and in remote rural communities right up until the early 2000s. There was an outbreak in the United States in 2003 that was traced to the importation of Gambian rats as exotic pets. Since then, there have been various introductions by travellers from those areas, and sometimes I think from exotic animals from those areas, but quite why there are so many cases as widespread as they are now that have really come to light this month is something that's having to be looked into, because I don't think anybody is hugely clear about that. It's presumably come by those routes in the first place, and we know it doesn't spread hugely readily person to person, but nonetheless it's arrived and is spreading sufficiently well that now that we're looking for it, cases are popping up, I hesitate to say all over the place, but in quite a few places.
Indeed, left, right and centre, it seems. Should we be concerned about it? The government insists it's pretty low risk, the threat to the public. What's your assessment?
My assessment is the threat to the wider public is pretty low, because actually it doesn't spread all that readily. I mean, the textbooks quote a secondary attack rate of 8%. So left to its own devices, it will probably burn out in time. But there's no doubt that it can be quite a nasty disease for those that get it. Again, the books quote a case fatality rate of 1%. That's probably a bit pessimistic, because those figures were calculated in populations that maybe didn't have particularly good underlying health. But it does tell us that this is something which we need to show intelligent concern about. And what's more, it's something that traditional public health measures should be able to bring under control. After all, you're only infectious when you're ill. When you're ill, that's visible to other people. you have a longish incubation period, usually it's 6 to 16 days, so there's a bit of time to find contacts. And finally, unlike some diseases, there isn't a carrier state in which you're infectious. And here I'm thinking about some of the other sexually transmitted infections to which this current monkeypox outbreak has been likened. So there are a number of things that can be done. It appears, although the information you get is a bit scanty, that that's precisely what the UK Health Security Agency is doing. And so I think that hopefully the situation can be brought under control in the space of a few weeks.
So just very quickly and finally, you don't seem very concerned. We're not looking at another pandemic in many regards, but people are being told to isolate if they do show symptoms.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, if you like, a poor cousin of smallpox, and the kind of rules that are being invoked in order to contain it are similar to those that were used for smallpox. So people have the disease, they're being told to stay at home for 3 weeks, and their contacts are being told, I imagine, are being traced and advised accordingly. That should be enough to stop the spread, if everybody goes along with the advice that they receive.
OK, really fascinating stuff. One to watch out for. Roland, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Roland Salmon there joining us down the line talking about monkeypox. Colin Brazier is in the studio this afternoon because he's on air in a couple of minutes' time. Colin, what's coming up between 4 and 6?
We'll have a look at monkeypox.
Yeah.
I mean, we are newly attuned to viruses, aren't we? But I thought your guest put that rather well, that it's sort of smallpox, small beer, smallpox light. We've got it under control. Yeah. But we are certainly on the lookout, aren't we? Michael Portello, former Defence Secretary, my studio guest throughout the day. I want to pay particular attention to children's services. One of those stories, Darren, we don't give enough attention to. 100,000 kids in care, 25% of them, they make up 25% of the homeless population, 25% of the prison population, the kids that we forget.
Wow. Stay tuned for that. 4 to 6, Colin's going to be on air. That is it from me for today, though. Back, of course, at 3 tomorrow. Tom is here at 9, Gloria at 12. I'll see you then. But first, let's bring you the weather this afternoon. See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's certainly been a showery start to the week for many of us. Some sharp downpours out there, more prolonged rain in some places, but there'll also be a few clear spells coming along overnight. Now, the more prolonged rain at the moment caused by a weather front that's close to the southeast, that does push away, but further showers or longer spells of rain are moving in from the west and northwest. And so that's during the evening, much of the UK seeing some heavy rain at times. A fairly lively rash of showers crossing central and southern parts of the country, whilst some more persistent rain affects the far northeast of Scotland. Scattered showers continuing for western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, but some clear spells in between for parts of the north and the west, and temperatures falling into the single figures, perhaps even the mid to low single figures in some sheltered northern parts. So a bright but chilly start to the day on Tuesday for many of us. Showers very quickly get going from the word go. Again, some heavy downpours out there, even some hail and thunder in the south. But away from the showers, some sunshine, particularly in the west, later in the afternoon into the evening, and temperatures around average for the time of year. So 15, 16 Celsius for Scotland, Northern Ireland, 17 or 18 for much of England and Wales. Showers continue rumbling on into the evening, especially in the east. Eventually, a clearer slot of weather moves west to east across the country, temperatures falling away as that happens. But by the morning on Wednesday, well, once again, we'll see cloud and outbreaks of rain moving into the north and the west, winds picking up as well. So double figures to start things off on Wednesday in the west, single figures further east. A bright start for eastern England. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain for Scotland, northern and western England, Wales and Northern Ireland, turning to showers later on. And Thursday brings with it more wind, more rain and showers before more settled weather on Friday.